Sir, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is the B-52. So we're here to learn firsthand from Colonel Ruscetta about this incredible aircraft. Sir, if you could, first off, introduce yourself and give us a little of your career background.
Yeah, absolutely, Daryl. So Colonel Lou Ruscetta, I started out actually as an Air Force brat. My dad is a retired Chief Master Sergeant, spent his career in supply. And that really is what wanted me and how I wanted to join the Air Force. So as a kid, I'd always wanted to join the Air Force. Was lucky enough to enter and graduate from the academy. And from there, obviously I went into the acquisition career field. So through my time when I graduated in '98, had some awesome opportunities. So I've worked with National Missile Defense. I've been able to work with F-16s on the Joint Helmet Mounted Queuing System, as well as some of the sniper pods and the targeting pods. I've had weapons development time and been able to also work in the command and control ISR realm. I've also had quite a bit of rapid acquisition experience, working both in the special operations community and within the rapid capabilities office. Outside of my acquisition time, I've been able to was lucky enough to do 2 operational deployments. Most recently, this last year, where I was able to and asked to run one of the NATO U.S. airfields in Afghanistan. So amazing opportunity. I've been really lucky in my career. I've seen some really amazing things. But I will tell you, as awesome as all the weapons systems and experiences are, they've been that way because of the people and the team that I've been able to work with. And that's really what's made my career and my experience so special.
Well, tell us a little bit about the B52 team that you work with now. How many people do you have? Where are you guys located?
Yeah, so we have in the system program office, we have right now about 397 people, civilian, contractors, and military. The majority are based here out of Oklahoma City, out of Tinker Air Force Base. And then we also have about a quarter of our team out at Wright-Patterson. But, it's interesting. We talk about locations, and COVID has really changed that, and teleworking has really changed that atmosphere. While I say we have 2 locations supporting the SPO, with about only 30 to 40 people coming into work every day, I really have 350 different locations that we operate. So we're very decentralized in our operating mindset right now. But, the 397 people that I just talked about, that's a small fraction of the B-52 team. We've obviously got our industry partner. Boeing is our OEM. So they've been the contractor on the B-52 since the very beginning. Right now, they are stationed here out of Oklahoma City. They have about 1,200 people in their workforce supporting the program. And then there's no way that this airplane and this platform can operate and be sustained without the hundreds of folks working within here at the depot at Tinker under the Air Logistics Complex and supporting not just the aircraft maintenance and the engine maintenance, but also software engineering. So, and we do have a few out at Edwards in our combined test force. So, and all of those folks and all of those people really support the 2nd Bomb Wing and 5th Bomb Wing out of Barstow and Minot, in making sure that aircraft can fly that tactical mile to really drop steel on target.
So you mentioned COVID. It's been a busy year, I know, for the aircraft. How did your team react to the whole COVID crisis?
It's amazing. And I think if I can sum that up in 3 words, it's really their ability to initiate, innovate, and improve. So when you look at the SPO and Boeing team, there's been a lot of effort and across the Air Force too. What we've been doing is moving to a digital format, digital communications. And it's tough, right? Because, I've always looked at acquisitions as a contact sport. You've got to get out there. You've got to understand what's going on, not just with the contractor, but also, working with our users, working with the people in the field to understand what their problems are and help find better solutions. So, COVID has really changed that mindset and forced us to operate different ways there's, there's pros and cons to that. Obviously, there's things that we've realized better. There's things that we've lost. But, what the team has done to overcome that. And that's really, like I said, the SPO, the engineering side of it. When you look at the depot, amazing effort by, like, for example, AMXG out here, the aircraft maintenance group, which has about, in the B52 squadron, has about 500 people. We try, and they try to produce 17 aircraft a year through the depot line. And in 2020, they were still able to produce that 17 aircraft, doing it safely, following different COVID measures, wearing additional personal protective equipment. It's just interesting. We talked about the people in this last question, and then, what we're doing, overcoming type of adversity. And COVID's just one long hurdle. But, when you really look at what the team has done, it's because there's such a special culture in the Buff. When you're part of something that's unique and historic, there's just this love of the platform, and it's not really inspired by a leader because we come and go. It's really inspired by the history of the platform and the opportunities for the future. So their constant, desire to initiate, innovate, improve is really something to be proud of.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned the historic nature of the aircraft, and I mean, the B52, it's just iconic. I mean, isn't it? Yep. I mean, it just is. It's been around, longer than all of us, and it's just incredible. So, I mean, doing some of my research, I saw that the first flight was like in 1952, and then over that 10-year span, the Air Force acquired 742 aircraft. So between 52 and 62. So that's 1962 when we stopped acquiring those aircraft, and yet it is still a vital part of the arsenal, and it just strikes me as incredible. I mean, for one, we don't acquire nearly 800 aircraft of anything anymore, and not in such a short span like that. But to have something that's lived on the way that it has, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it is awesome to think about what the teams and in the past, what they were able to do. So really, you talked about first flight being in 1952. The Air Force actually bought these aircraft in the first two aircraft in 1947. And there's actually a pretty cool story. The original Boeing design for the B-52 actually was centered around 4 propeller engines, not the 8 jet engines that we have now. But that design couldn't meet. I mean, the Air Force had some ambitious requirements, right? If you look at the timing of this, what was going on is the beginning of the Cold War. How do we hold the Soviet Union in check? And so what the Air Force had in mind for this intercontinental bomber, and what those 4 propeller type engines could not deliver. So, and probably I'm sure was a pretty heated discussion between the Air Force and Boeing at the time. The Boeing engineers actually went back to their hotel room, and over the weekend, in consulting with the Seattle Boeing engineers, came up with the proposal for that 8-engine jet engine plane with this time a 35-degree swept wing. The original plane had something more normal of a probably 10 to 15 degree swept wing, but the B-52 has this 35-degree swept wing. So just the design of it is pretty key. And when you look at what was going on, right, we're talking the 50s, very early 60s, that's kind of, we're in the throes of that Eisenhower military industrial complex. The strategic priorities of the U.S. was, really geared towards the Cold War. And, this was going to be the Air Force bomber that was able to manage that and be a critical leg of the triad. So, actually production of the B-52 was in 2 different areas. It started out in Seattle and then transitioned to Wichita. So, about 275 aircraft were actually built at Seattle, and 467 were built in Wichita, Kansas. So wow. I think when you look at the sheer numbers, and again, it gets back to, what the priorities were of the Air Force at the time, and the ability for Boeing and to go and understand, okay, here's what we've got to do in this transition. You had two places actually building at the same time, which obviously helped the numbers too. So that's kind of the background of when you look at how can we do 742 and look at it, just amazing type of airplane it is that to have lasted this long.
Yeah. So talk to us about some of the characteristics that allowed the Buff to stay relevant for such a long period of time.
Yeah. So, when you really look at what does it take to keep this airplane, what does the Air Force look at? An aircraft's got to be safe to fly, right? We got to be able to afford the maintenance. We got to be able to afford the operations, and those operations have to be useful, right? So it's got to be safe, economical, and useful. And this platform, the Buff has been that since the 1950s, and it's still doing that now. So, we really, and we'll talk, some as we, I'm sure with some of the different upgrades we're doing, but this aircraft, flies on average about 200, each aircraft flies about 250 hours a year. So, I mean, it definitely gets it definitely gets the work done. We have aircraft that fly 35-hour missions, right? I mean, we have flown 35-hour combat missions, flying from combat from wherever it's based out to the Middle East, out to Southeast Asia, and then back. So it is definitely, definitely something that's safe. And from an economical standpoint, that gets to the organic ability of the depots for our ability to maintain these aircraft, bring them through, every 4 years, make sure, do all the structural integrity work, any type of small maintenance or even some heavy maintenance actions. And then we even organically maintain the engines. And then from a useful standpoint, it has been useful, obviously, not just from the very beginning. When you look at it conducting bombing raids in Vietnam, linebacker 1 and linebacker 2, but before that, and even after that, it was standing alert during the Cold War. But we've also operated in permissive environments against Iraq, supported coalition forces, U.S. and coalition forces against terrorists in the Middle East. I mean, today, right, on the 23rd of April, we had 2 aircraft land in the Middle East that are supporting and protecting the retrograde operations in Afghanistan. So, it has been able to operate, and not just a nuclear mission, what it was originally designed for, but that conventional mission as well. And it has always been the basis of our hypersonic weapons testing. We're doing that now with the long-range standoff missile, with Arrow, with numerous kind of efforts to show, and it's been part of its history as well.
Yeah. So certainly the platform's changed a lot, and you alluded to some of the upgrades. So let's talk about some of the major modifications that have occurred over the time.
Yeah. So interesting enough, there haven't been that many major modifications over the time of the B52. It is relatively, especially the B52H, what came off the line in 1960 and 61, very similar to what we're flying today. One of the biggest visible changes is in the early 90s, right around 91, the Air Force removed the tail gun out of the B52. So it used to have a gunner position and a tail gun in the back. That 6th crew member was removed. It really wasn't useful. Again, we get to, safe, economical, and useful. And that was not a useful part of the B52 anymore based on advances in the adversaries. So, but, more recently, right, we've gone under, the Buff has gone under its largest communication and situation upgrade in its history. So one of the ones that I kind of want to highlight is the combat network communications technology. We call it Connect. So that modification really upgraded the B-52 crew information management system, and then also is really going to help provide that digital foundation for any future growth as we keep this B-52 going. So under that communications capability, it allowed for in-flight conventional weapons retargeting. It allowed us to improve that operator interface and gave the crew really enhanced situational awareness. Another one is our 1760 internal weapons bay upgrade. This allowed us to actually start integrating smart weapons onto the aircraft, not just the GPS weapons, but also some of the newer cruise missiles. So, and with this finishing up, and both will finish up this year, this is actually going to increase the smart weapons capacity on the B52 by 67%. A huge force enabler on the platform.
So I think from Dr. Strangelove, the communication device in that was like the CRM or something like that. So they don't have that anymore, I guess.
No, and we don't have anybody riding any of the bombs all the way down either. That's that's such a great movie.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the systems that it does have. I read recently that the B52 is getting a new radar, and it's similar to the radar that the F-15 uses. Is that correct? And what kind of capabilities does that bring to the aircraft?
Yeah, absolutely. So that current right now we have the current APQ 166 radar. It's an old mechanically scanned array. It was the same radar. It was the original radar put in the B-52 back in the 50s and 60s. So we have not had an upgrade to that actual core radar. While we have had some, we've upgraded the processing unit, some of the displays, with back in the 80s we did this. So we've got cathode ray tubes. Think black screens with green blobs. That's what we're using right now with the current radar. So this radar modernization program replaces that old 1950s APQ 166 with the APG 79. Like you talked about, it's very similar to what the F-15 and the F-18 are using. What it brings about is, really both operational and sustainment capability. So from an operational standpoint, really be able to prosecute a wider set of targets with much greater accuracy in all types of weather, and that's pretty critical. And then also from our sustainment side, the mean time between failure is estimated to be in excess of 800 hours, literally over a 1,500% improvement over what we have now. The radar is a driver in some of our downtime and maintenance actions now. So this is going to be, greatly improve that probability of success when the B-52 has to go for its most critical missions. We need to make sure that entire system's operational. So with that improved mean time between failure comes a great savings and sustainment, over $350 million in costs over the legacy systems in savings. So, again, I want to go back to those themes of safe, economical, and really relevant. And this gets to both, where this radar modernization makes sure that it's still safe, right? And the plane's always been safe, but it's still safe, but really makes it more economical going into the future, as well as relevant against this next generation fight.
Yeah, sustainability is always the key on systems like that, right? I mean, you got to keep aircraft in the air and keep them affordable. So we've, of course, the re-engineering effort gets a lot of attention, and it has. And I recognize that you may not be able to get into some of the specifics. I know that there's actually competition, which is good.
Absolutely.
Going into this program, but can you tell us anything about it, and what are some of the objectives, or what are some of the benefits that you think you'll be able to pull from that? And again, is it sustainment, or is it operations like fuel savings and things like that? Or
yeah, absolutely. So when the H model was built in the 1960 and 61, it was actually the biggest change between the G to the H model was going from a turbojet engine to this TF33 turbofan engine now. So we're still flying the same Pratt & Whitney TF33 engine that we had in the 60s. And we've been relying on the organic manufacturing, repair, and overhaul capability of the depot to sustain these engines. So, we've had various studies have been conducted over the years that consistently show that, hey, these engines we're basically out of Schlitz with our ability to keep supporting them. And we're near end of life and not economical repair. So, again, it's how do we keep this flying? Is it economical? That's why the team's really gone through a Section 804 middle tier acquisition authorities in the development and of putting on this commercial engine replacement program. So what kind of describe how we're going about it, and then what are some of the things that we'll get. So it's pretty awesome to look at how the team's going about it, moving the aircraft into the digital age. So we're starting with a virtual system prototype where, working with the working with Boeing and the engine manufacturer, we'll actually get digital models of not just the engine, but all that, the fuel system, the nacelles, the power generation system, how all of that integrates into the wing, and as well as in the cockpit, the digital displays that will be used for the new engines. And then we'll move into a physical system prototype, which is getting 2 aircraft outfitted, getting ready for tests. So, the way this middle tier acquisitions allowed us to move is in sections to understand. We get some early training. So even with this virtual system prototype, that is something that those virtual models we can deliver to the field. The maintainers can start planning. The trainers can start looking at what do we need to do from training systems, especially in the maintenance training side, right? So really from a sustainment side, it's really prepping the battlefield for when these new engines come along. So we're not just throwing things over the fence and going, hey, here's 2 engines or here's 8 engines. Go find out how to sustain it and train your folks on it. So a lot of early development and a lot of early look into how we're going to field this. And then, you talked about the different types of capabilities. We shaped this program actually to try to still make sure that we fit it within the current envelope. So from an operational standpoint, a performance standpoint, you're still going to get very similar thrust, very similar flying dynamics. And that was done on purpose to make sure we didn't have to enter into a huge testing program. And then you have huge training deltas within your flight crew. Again, the TF-33 was, these aircraft have been on, these engines have been on the aircraft since the 1960s. Buying newer, updated engines, we will get, lower sustainment costs because, that's just a fact from the engines right now being so hard to maintain. We do expect to get some additional fuel costs. Fuel savings. That it was not really a requirement. That was more of a desire, and we knew that was going in. But we did not want to limit the different products that we can see as we entered into competition. Because as you kind of alluded to before, competition is great for the Air Force. It's great for the program. It's great for the platform. So how do we balance the competition and make sure that we get enough players in there so we can see really who's best on the bench and make sure that we don't go and extend our program because in the end, we're trying to deliver this as quick as possible. We're pushing for an IOC in 2029, and that's a very aggressive schedule. But we're doing the things up front, like I talked about, that virtual engineering, these prototype efforts, making sure the training is there in order to get that done.
So it's interesting. So we've gone from a point where some engineers sketched out the design of the airplane on the back of a napkin, and now we've got digital engineering putting new engines on this aircraft, creating these new digital virtual models for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a full circle, and really it's trying to, we can't look at the B52 as an aging platform. The Buff's going to be around for another 30 years. We really need to look at the Buff as, hey, alongside those 5th and 6th gen systems that are being developed now, is how do we get this to 2050? And again, how do we make sure that this is relevant in 2050? So looking at it as an aging platform, and it's easy to rely on it as an excuse. But when you really look at what we're doing, so the FY21 budget has $3.8 billion of investment going towards the B52. Again, because it's still safe to fly, it's still economical, and it's still something that is relevant in the fight. So, the Air Force is putting the investment in this platform because the platform has that capability, not just structurally, but also from a operational standpoint to move us into the future.
So talk about the future then. What does the future hold for the B52? Do you see it maybe being like a quarterback one day with some unmanned wingmen flying alongside of it, or will it be in operation 100 years? With 100 years in its belt?
I'll tell you, Daryl, that's a great question. You know, I would be, I don't want to limit what this B52 can do, because I think there are people now that are looking, you know, if and we do have people in the SPO, for example, that flew in linebacker too, and to see that the plane is still operational. You know, the B52 has really been on that cutting edge of technology since the beginning. You know, in the 60s, NASA and the Air Force used it to test, the X-15 hypersonic airplane. It was used to test other hypersonic systems. You know, the X-43, for example, back in 2001. It's been used to test space cruise stations. And now it's, flying and testing more hypersonic weapons. So, what will the future hold for the buff? I'll tell you, it's going to be phenomenal what it can do, but it's still going to, meet its national objectives, which is just amazing. Because, when you look at what the B-52 has done, and it's not just the weapons that it carries or been able to test and further development on, but it's also been a symbol, right? I mean, this is an airplane that just the presence of this airplane has brought countries back to the negotiating table, right? The fact that we've got it sitting out there in the Middle East right now, to make sure our adversaries know that, hey, if they are going to go against and try to disrupt retrograde operations, that they've got bad things coming to them, and so it's not just the capability of dropping the weapons on it, but it's also just we call it the peacemaker for a reason, and it's just the ability that when it's present, and it can go from the United States to most any region and back. So, like I said, we've flown 36-hour missions, nonstop, operational missions in the past. And it's something that shows not just the global power of the Air Force, but the global reach. The future is unlimited for this platform.
Sir, that just about brings us to the end of our time. But before we go, I just want to see, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I appreciate the ability to converse about this airplane. I'm pretty passionate about it. It is an amazing platform with an amazing team. Not just from the SPO, but from Team Tinker. When you look at the depot and software maintenance, when you look at out at Edwards with the flight test program and Boeing as the OEM, as well as some of our major subs, Raytheon with the radar, and there are tons of others that I'll probably get in trouble for not mentioning. But again, this aircraft's going to be flying for another 30 years. So we got to make sure we don't think of it, like I said before, as that aging platform. Because when we continue to think about what the airplane can do and what this platform can offer to national security and national defense, it's still very relevant moving forward. It's just, you talk about, ask, will it reach 100-year service? I'm not sure if it'll ever reach 100 years. I hope it does. It's going to come really close. We're expected to go to 2050. So, by that measure, we're posturing for it to be a centurion. And when the B1 and B2, when that last B1 and B2 crew fly their aircraft to the boneyard, I'm sure we can get a buff to take those crews back to wherever they need to go. Right. I mean, it's just an amazing place.
All right. Sir, thanks very much for your time today. We appreciate it on Leadership Blog.
Hey, thanks a lot, Daryl.